A dog brought her dying puppy to this man. What happened next is a miracle. A stormy night. A desperate German shepherd pushes her paw onto a stranger's knee, begging him to save the tiny life fading in front of his eyes. Against all odds, he pulls the puppy back from the brink. But this rescue is only the beginning. Because hidden in that moment of compassion lies a dangerous secret, a secret powerful men would kill to protect. Soon the man who tried to do the right thing will find himself hunted, betrayed, and forced into a fight he never wanted. The dog wasn't just asking for help. She was leading him into a world of lies, fire, and life-or-death choices. What dark truth did this mother risk everything to reveal? And can one man's courage protect the innocent before it's too late? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire, making Calder Rourke's hands freeze on the wooden boat hull he was sanding. The familiar sound transported him back to places he'd rather forget. He forced himself to focus on the smooth grain beneath his calloused fingers, letting the rhythmic motion ground him in the present. Rain hammered against the metal roof of his riverside boat shop, drowning out the whispers of memory. The old building creaked and groaned, but Calder found comfort in its sturdy walls and the smell of sawdust and varnish. Here, in this simple workspace, he could almost forget the weight of dog tags that had once hung around his neck, the memories of battlefield trauma that still haunted his dreams. "Just keep working," he muttered to himself, reaching for another sheet of sandpaper. One stroke at a time. The mantra had served him well since leaving the service, helping him build a quiet life repairing boats in this small riverside town. A flash of lightning illuminated the workshop through its grimy windows, followed by another boom that rattled the tools on their hooks. Calder wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve, leaving a streak of sawdust across his weathered face. At 40 years old, he felt twice his age on nights like this. The scraping sound of claws on concrete cut through the storm's rhythm. Calder turned, expecting to see a raccoon seeking shelter, but instead found himself staring into the desperate eyes of a German shepherd. The dog stood in the open doorway, her fur matted and dirty, one leg held slightly off the ground. "Hey there," Calder said softly, instinctively dropping into the gentle tone he'd used with wounded soldiers. "You're safe here, girl." The shepherd limped forward, her dark eyes fixed on his. There was an intelligence in that gaze that struck him, not just fear or pain, but purpose. She moved with determination despite her obvious injuries, coming straight to where he knelt beside the boat. When she reached him, she pressed one paw against his knee. The gesture was so deliberate it made his throat tight. Then he noticed what she carried in her mouth. "Oh no," he breathed as she gently laid a tiny puppy at his feet. The pup couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, its body limp and still. But something in Calder's medical training kicked in. He could see the shallow rise and fall of its chest. It was alive, but barely. His combat medic instincts took over. He scooped up the puppy, noting its cold temperature and blue-tinged gums. The symptoms clicked together in his mind. Shallow breathing, hypothermia, muscle weakness. This wasn't just exposure to the storm. "Poisoning," he muttered. "Probably organophosphates." His hands moved automatically as he spoke, remembering procedures practiced countless times in the field. He grabbed his emergency medical kit, old habits died hard, and pulled out a vial of atropine he kept for just such cases. With practiced precision, he administered a tiny dose to the puppy, following it with activated charcoal to absorb any remaining toxins. The mother dog watched intently, her intelligent eyes never leaving his hands as he worked. She seemed to understand he was helping, staying close, but not interfering. "Come on, little one," Calder murmured, gently massaging the puppy's chest. "Fight for me." Seconds stretched into minutes, marked only by the continuing drum of rain and rumble of thunder. Then finally the puppy gave a tiny gasp. Its eyes fluttered open as it drew a stronger breath. Relief flooded through Calder's body. He'd seen too much death in his life. This small victory felt enormous. The mother dog's tail wagged slightly, and she pressed her nose to her puppy's fur. It was only then, as he cradled the recovering pup, that Calder noticed something odd about the mother dog. There was a rectangular patch of shaved fur on her shoulder, the skin beneath it slightly raised as if recently healed, and attached to her collar was a metal tag that made his blood run cold. "Harlow Security," he read aloud, running his thumb over the stamped letters. Everyone in town knew about Harlow Security. Boyd Harlow had built his private security empire from nothing, becoming one of the most powerful men in the region. But there had always been whispers about his methods, rumors of corruption and cruelty that never quite stuck. Calder looked at the mother dog's pleading eyes, then at the puppy recovering in his arms. What kind of security company would poison puppies? And why had this mother dog sought him out specifically? The German shepherd pressed against his leg as another thunderclap shook the building. Her presence felt like both a request and a warning. Whatever she'd escaped from, she'd chosen to trust him. Looking at that metal tag gleaming in the workshop's dim light, Calder had a sinking feeling that by saving this puppy, he'd just stepped into something much bigger and darker than he'd intended. His quiet life-repairing boats suddenly felt very fragile. But as the puppy squirmed and gave a tiny whimper, Calder knew he couldn't turn away. He'd seen too much suffering in his life to ignore it now, no matter the cost. The mother dog settled beside him, her head resting against his knee as he continued to monitor the puppy's breathing. Outside, the storm raged on, but in this moment of shared trust and healing, Calder felt more at peace than he had in years. Whatever came next, he knew he'd made the right choice. He examined the puppy more carefully now that its condition had stabilized. It was a female, probably no more than 6 weeks old, with the same distinctive markings as her mother. Despite the ordeal she'd been through, she was beginning to show signs of her natural puppy energy, weakly attempting to lick his hand. "You're a fighter," he told her softly, checking her gums again. They were returning to a healthier pink color. "Just like your mama." The mother dog's ears perked up at his words, and she gave a soft whine. Calder noticed more details about her condition now. Beneath the mud and matted fur, there were scattered scrapes and cuts. She'd clearly fought hard to escape wherever she'd come from and protect her puppy. Thunder rolled again, but this time neither dog flinched. They seemed to know they were safe here, in this workshop that had become Calder's sanctuary after leaving the service. He'd chosen this quiet life to escape the chaos and violence of his past. Now it seemed chaos had found him anyway, wearing a Harlow security tag. He knew he should probably call the police, but something held him back. If Harlow Security was involved in something illegal, local law enforcement might not be trustworthy. Boyd Harlow's influence ran deep in this town. "Looks like we're in this together," he told the dogs, reaching out to gently stroke the mother's head. She leaned into his touch, and for a moment the storm outside seemed very far away. The puppy was getting stronger by the minute, her breathing deep and regular now. She'd need monitoring through the night, but Calder was confident she would recover fully. He'd seen, too, many lives slip away on the battlefield. This small victory felt like a gift, a chance to protect something innocent. But as he looked at that ominous metal tag again, he knew this night was just the beginning. Whatever dark truth these dogs had escaped from, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. Boyd Harlow wasn't known for letting go of what he considered his property easily. The German shepherd watched intently as Calder finished wrapping the recovering puppy in a warm blanket. Her intelligent amber eyes held a desperate urgency that made him uneasy. Instead of settling down now that her little one was safe, she paced anxiously between Calder and the shop door, whining. "What is it, girl?" Calder asked softly, noting how the shepherd's ears perked at his voice. She limped over and tugged at his sleeve with gentle teeth, pulling him towards the door. "You want me to follow you?" The dog released his sleeve and barked once, sharp and clear. There was something distinctly purposeful about her behavior, that reminded Calder of the military working dogs he'd known overseas. This wasn't just any stray. "All right then," he said, grabbing his rain jacket. "Lead the way." He paused to scoop up the stabilized puppy, tucking it securely inside his coat. "I'll call you Valka. Seems to fit a brave girl like you." Valka led him out into the downpour, moving with determination despite her obvious injuries. The rain had turned the dirt road into thick mud that sucked at Calder's boots as they made their way past the edge of town. His unease grew as they approached an old concrete culvert beneath the highway overpass. Valka disappeared into the dark opening. When Calder crouched down to follow, the beam of his flashlight revealed 2 more puppies huddled in the shallow water. Their tiny bodies were trembling, barely moving. "Oh, God!" he breathed, heart clenching at the sight. These pups showed the same signs of poisoning as the first, but they were much worse off. He gathered them up quickly, tucking one inside each coat pocket. "Hang on, little ones." The county veterinary clinic was only a 10-minute drive away. Calder broke several speed limits getting there. The 3 puppies and Valka crowded into his truck cab. He burst through the clinic doors, startling the receptionist. "I need help. These puppies have been poisoned," he explained urgently. "They need immediate treatment." Dr. Lenore Vance emerged from an exam room, her face settling into a mask of professional detachment as she observed the scene. "Sir, we're actually closing up for the evening." "Please," Calder insisted. "They won't make it through the night without help." He carefully extracted the weakest pup, its breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Vance's eyes narrowed when she spotted the Harlow security tag. "These appear to be private property. Where exactly did you find them?" "Does that matter right now?" Calder demanded, struggling to keep his voice level. "They're dying, Mr. Rourke. Calder Rourke. Mr. Rourke, I understand your concern, but these animals legally belong to Harlow's security. Without proper authorization, I cannot provide treatment. It would be a liability issue." Calder stared at her in disbelief. "They're living creatures, not equipment. You took an oath to help animals in need?" "And I have a license to protect," she replied coldly. "I suggest you return these dogs to their rightful owner. Harlow Security can decide how to handle their own property." Before Calder could argue further, the clinic door chimed. A tall man in a Harlow Security uniform stepped in, his polished name badge identifying him as Operations Foreman Jenkins. "Evening, folks," he said smoothly, though his eyes were hard. "I believe you have some of our assets here." Calder instinctively pulled the puppies closer, feeling Valka press against his leg. "These dogs have been poisoned. They need medical attention." Jenkins pulled out a thick envelope. "We appreciate you finding our missing inventory. Let me compensate you for your trouble, say $5,000. Cash, of course. Then we can put this whole unfortunate situation behind us." The implication was clear. "Take the money and walk away." Calder looked down at the trembling puppies in his arms, at Valka's trusting eyes, then back at Jenkins' cold smile. The choice wasn't even a choice at all. "No deal," he said firmly. "These dogs need help, and I'm not leaving until they get it." Jenkins' smile vanished. "You might want to reconsider that position, Mr. Rourke. Harlow Security is a powerful company in this county. We don't take kindly to interference in our business operations." "Is that a threat?" "Consider it friendly advice. Take the money, forget what you've seen. Things will go better for everyone that way." Calder straightened to his full height, meeting Jenkins' gaze steadily. "The answer is still no, and if anything happens to these dogs, or to me, there will be questions. Lots of them." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Finally, Jenkins shrugged, tucking the envelope away. "Have it your way. But remember, you were given a chance to be reasonable." He turned and walked out, the door closing with an ominous click behind him. Dr. Vance cleared her throat. "Mr. Rourke, I must insist that you—" "Save it," Calder cut her off. "I'll find help somewhere else." He gathered up the puppies and Valka, heading back out into the rain. His truck started with a roar in the darkened parking lot. As he drove, Calder's mind raced. The tag, the poisoning, the bribe, the threats. It all pointed to something deeply wrong at Harlow Security. What exactly had he stumbled into? One thing was certain. He was now squarely in opposition to whatever was going on. There would be consequences. He glanced at his passengers. The puppies were growing weaker, but Valka met his eyes in the rearview mirror with unwavering trust. She had chosen him to help, and he wouldn't let her down. He pressed down on the accelerator, heading for the next town over where he knew a retired vet who might be willing to help. Whatever storm was coming, he would face it. These dogs deserved a chance, and he was going to make sure they got it. Calder sat at his kitchen table, staring at the metal tag that had been attached to the German shepherd's ear. The morning light caught the engraved letters. Harlow Security. His fingers traced the edges of the tag, while his mind raced through his options. The 3 puppies and their mother were sleeping in the corner, finally safe and warm after their ordeal. But for how long? He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Tamsin Pike. Just seeing her name brought back memories of that rainy night 5 years ago, when he'd found her car overturned in a ditch. If he hadn't been there, hadn't used his combat medic training. Taking a deep breath, Calder pressed the call button. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp, professional voice answered. Pike Legal Services. Tamsin? It's Calder Rourke. There was a pause on the other end. Calder. It's been a while. I know, I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. He hesitated, then added, I need your help. I'm calling in that favor. 20 minutes later, Tamsin's silver sedan pulled up outside his boat shop. She stepped out, looking exactly as he remembered. Sharp features, determined stance, and eyes that missed nothing. Her business suit seemed out of place among the wooden boats and tools, but she moved with purpose as she approached. Show me what you've got, she said without preamble. Calder led her inside, where he'd laid out everything on his workbench. The tag, photos he'd taken of the dog's injuries, and the paperwork from the county clinic. Tamsin picked up the tag first, examining it under the shop's fluorescent lights. Harlow, she muttered. Boyd Harlow. Of course it would be him. You know him. Tamsin's lips tightened. Everyone in the legal community knows Harlow. His security company has contracts with half the businesses in town, but there have always been rumors. She pulled out her laptop and began typing. These tags have serial numbers. Let me run it through the system. For the next hour, they dug deeper. Tamsin's legal database access revealed a pattern. Dozens of microchip registrations for German shepherds, all linked to Harlow Security, all mysteriously erased or marked as deceased within months. Look at this, Tamsin said, turning the screen toward Calder. Every time a chip gets erased, there's a corresponding euthanasia record from the county shelter. But the dates don't match up. Some of these dogs were supposedly put down before their chips were even registered. Calder thought of Dr. Vance's dismissive attitude at the clinic. They're falsifying records. Sheriff Dorsey signs off on all of them. Tamsin's voice was bitter. Harlow's been his biggest campaign donor for the last 3 elections. No one touches Harlow in this town, Calder. The whole system's in his pocket. The shepherd, Valka, had woken up and padded over to them. She placed her head on Calder's knee, looking up at him with those knowing eyes. He scratched behind her ears, feeling the rough scar tissue where the tag had been. I can't walk away from this, he said quietly. These dogs, whatever Harlow's doing to them, it'll be dangerous, Tamsin warned. Harlow doesn't just have money, he has muscle. Those security guards of his? Ex-military, most of them, and they're not known for being gentle. Calder met her gaze. I've seen enough people look the other way while bad things happen. In the war, in civilian life, it's always the same. Someone has power, someone else suffers, and everyone pretends not to notice. Tamsin studied him for a long moment. Then she closed her laptop with a decisive click. All right. But we do this smart. We need evidence, real evidence, not just suspicious patterns. And we need to build a case that goes above Dorsey's head. You'll help? Calder asked, somewhat surprised by her quick agreement. She gave him a wry smile. You saved my life, Calder. But that's not why I'm helping. I became a lawyer to fight for justice, not to watch corrupt men like Harlow break the law with impunity. Together, they began planning. Tamsin had contacts in the state attorney's office who might be interested in Harlow's operation. Calder knew the layout of Harlow's training facility from his boat deliveries. The security company was right on the river. We need to be careful, Tamsin stressed. One wrong move and Harlow will bury us, maybe literally. He's not used to anyone standing up to him. Then it's about time someone did, Calder replied, watching as one of the puppies wobbled over to investigate Tamsin's shoe. She reached down to pet it, and something in her professional demeanor softened. These little ones, she said softly. They're worth the risk, aren't they? Calder nodded. They are. And so are all the others Harlow's hurt. Their eyes met, and an understanding passed between them. They were in this together now, whether it led to justice or ruin. The weight of the decision settled over them both. Two people choosing to stand against a corrupt system that had seemed untouchable for too long. As Tamsin gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. I'll start making calls. We'll need a safe place to keep any evidence we gather. And Calder? She turned back to face him. Watch your back. Harlow has eyes everywhere in this town. You too, he replied. And thank you. After she left, Calder sat down among the dogs, letting them curl up against him. The path ahead would be dangerous, but looking at these innocent creatures who had already suffered. So much, he knew, they had made the right choice. Sometimes, he reflected, the hardest battles were the ones you couldn't walk away from. The evening sky cast long shadows across Calder's boat shop as he finished organizing the temporary kennels he'd set up in the back room. Valka watched attentively as he filled water bowls and checked on the sleeping puppies. The German shepherd's amber eyes seemed to hold a mix of gratitude and lingering worry. We'll figure this out, girl, Calder said softly, reaching down to scratch behind her ears. You're all safe here. The sharp crack of breaking glass shattered the quiet. Before Calder could react, orange flames erupted across the workshop floor. The acrid smell of gasoline filled the air as fire raced along a deliberate trail, splitting him off from the main exit. No! Calder shouted, his heart pounding as he realized someone had thrown multiple firebombs through the windows. The flames spread with unnatural speed. This was no accident. The puppies began whimpering in their kennels as smoke filled the room. Valka barked urgently, already moving towards the cages. Calder pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth, his combat medic training kicking in as he assessed the situation. The main door was blocked by fire, but the river access remained clear, for now. We've got to get them out, he called to Valka, who seemed to understand perfectly. Together, they rushed to the kennels. Calder's fingers fumbled with the first cage latch as the heat intensified. The metal burned his hands, but he ignored the pain, focusing only on freeing the frightened pups. Smoke stung his eyes as he worked to release each cage. 1, 2, 3 puppies now huddled against Valka's legs. The old German shepherd herded them toward the back door, while Calder gathered up spare leashes and basic supplies, knowing they couldn't return here. A thunderous creaking sound overhead made him look up. Parts of the roof were starting to cave in. Go! He shouted to Valka, who hesitated, clearly unwilling to leave him. The heat was becoming unbearable as the fire consumed the wooden building. Calder stumbled, his lungs burning from the smoke. Immediately, Valka was at his side, tugging insistently at his sleeve. Her grip was gentle but firm, guiding him toward safety just as she had led him to the puppies that first night. Together they hurried the pups toward the river dock, the flames roaring behind them. They had barely made it outside when Calder heard it, the distinctive whoosh of fire reaching the fuel tanks he kept for the boats. Jump! He yelled, scooping up 2 puppies while Valka grabbed the third by its scruff. They leaped into the cold river water just as a massive explosion rocked the night, sending burning debris raining down around them. The shockwave hit them even underwater. Calder kicked hard, surfacing several yards from the dock with the puppies safely in his grip. Valka emerged beside him, the third pup held carefully above the water. They swam to a shallow area where they could stand, all of them coughing and shaking but alive. From the riverbank, they watched as the boat shop, Calder's business and home for the past 8 years, burned to the ground. The heat was so intense they could feel it even from the water. Fire trucks wailed in the distance, but Calder knew they wouldn't arrive in time to save anything. "This is what they're capable of," he said hoarsely, still holding the shivering puppies close. "They would have killed all of us without a second thought." Valka pressed against his leg, her wet fur mingling with his soaked clothes, offering silent support. Calder pulled out his waterproof phone and called Tamsin. She answered on the first ring. "Calder? What's wrong?" "They just firebombed my shop," he said, his voice rough from smoke. "The dogs and I barely made it out. This is Harlow's work. He's not playing games anymore." There was a moment of tense silence before Tamsin spoke. "Get to my place immediately. Don't stop anywhere else. I'll call in some favors, but—" She paused, and he could hear the worry in her voice. "The local authorities won't help us. The system here is completely compromised. Harlow's got too many people in his pocket. We need to take this higher up, find help outside the county." "I know," Calder replied, watching as flames consumed the last of his livelihood. "But first, we need to get somewhere safe. They won't stop with just the shop." "I'll be waiting," Tamsin assured him. "And Calder? Be careful. Take back roads. Watch for tails. These people clearly aren't afraid to kill." Calder ended the call and looked down at the 4 wet dogs beside him. Valka met his gaze steadily, her determination matching his own. The puppies huddled close, trembling not just from the cold water, but from fear. "Come on," he said softly to them all. "We need to move. And this time, we're not just running, we're going to fight back." They made their way up the riverbank, water streaming from their clothes and fur. The night had turned deadly, but it had also crystallized something in Calder's mind. This wasn't just about saving a few dogs anymore. This was about standing up to the kind of evil that would burn down, a building with innocent animals inside, the kind of corruption that had infected his town so deeply that even the law couldn't be trusted. As they disappeared into the shadows, leaving the inferno behind them, Calder knew there was no turning back. Harlow had shown his true colors, and in doing so had only strengthened Calder's resolve to bring him down, no matter the cost. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the basement records room of the state office building as Tamsin Pike waited, her heart beating quickly against her ribs. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:30 in the evening, long after normal operating hours. She checked her watch again, wondering if her contact would actually show. A door clicked open, making her jump. A thin woman with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses slipped into the room, clutching a thick manila envelope to her chest. "Miss Pike?" she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I'm Margaret from Records." "Thank you for meeting me," Tamsin said quietly, stepping forward. "I understand the risk you're taking." Margaret's hands trembled as she passed over the envelope. "What's in here? It's worse than you thought. That shepherd you asked about? She wasn't just any police dog. Her name is Astra. Was Astra. She was decorated, saved 3 officers' lives during a warehouse raid last year." Tamsin's fingers tightened on the envelope. According to official records, she was euthanized 6 months ago after being injured in the line of duty. Margaret's voice dropped even lower. "But I found irregularities." The euthanasia order and death certificate were both signed by Sheriff Emile Dorsey, not a licensed veterinarian. And there are gaps in the chain of custody documentation. Tamsin pulled out the files, spreading them across a nearby desk under the harsh fluorescent light. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Commendation certificates, training records, medical histories. Astra had been a remarkable animal, with citations for bravery and exceptional service. "There's more," Margaret continued, pulling out additional papers. 2 weeks after Astra's supposed euthanization, a large payment was made from Harlow Securities accounts to an offshore holding company linked to Sheriff Dorsey. The timing can't be coincidental. Tamsin felt sick as the pieces clicked into place. He sold her. Dorsey falsified the papers and sold a decorated police dog to Harlow's operation. Yes, but that's not all. Margaret pointed to another document. "See these transfer records? 3 weeks ago, Harlow was moving a shipment of dogs between facilities. That's when one of their prize breeding females escaped, taking a valuable puppy with her. The description matches your shepherd exactly." Tamsin stared at the photo clipped to the file, a proud German shepherd in a K9 unit vest, those same intelligent amber eyes that now watched over Calder's boat shop. She wasn't just a stray who found a puppy, Tamsin whispered. She deliberately took that pup and went looking for help. "She knew what Harlow was doing was wrong," Margaret said. "These working dogs are incredibly smart and loyal to what's right, not just to whoever holds their leash." She gathered up the documents, returning them to the envelope. "Everything you need to expose this is in here, but be careful. If Dorsey would betray and sell his own K9 unit dog, he'd do anything to keep this quiet." Tamsin finished grimly. She tucked the envelope securely in her briefcase. "Thank you, Margaret. I know what this could cost you." "Just make it count," the records clerk said, already heading for the door. "That dog deserved better than betrayal. Make them pay for what they did to her." Back in her car, Tamsin's hands shook as she called Calder's number. When his voicemail picked up, she left an urgent message. "I know who she is. She's not just any shepherd. She's Astra, a decorated police K9. Dorsey falsified her death and sold her to Harlow. And that puppy? She stole it from them, Calder. She knew exactly what she was doing when she came to you for help. Call me as soon as you get this. We have proof of everything now." Driving through the dark streets, Tamsin's mind raced. This wasn't just about animal abuse anymore. This was corruption at the highest level of local law enforcement. A sheriff selling his own K9 unit dog into an illegal operation. And Astra, that brave, brilliant dog, had not only escaped, but had actively worked to expose the truth by seeking out someone she sensed would help. The revelation transformed everything they knew about the situation. Astra wasn't simply a stray mother protecting her pup. She was a trained law enforcement officer who had recognized evil and chosen to fight back. Even after being betrayed by her own handler, she had maintained her core mission to serve and protect. Tamsin pulled into her driveway, clutching the envelope of evidence. In the morning, she would begin building their case. But first, she needed to get these documents somewhere safe. She had no doubt that if Dorsey discovered what she had, he would stop at nothing to destroy the proof of his corruption. As she locked her car, Tamsin's phone buzzed with a text from Calder. "Shop's secure for tonight. Astra's on guard. Come by first thing, we need to plan our next move." Tamsin smiled grimly as she typed back, "Wait till you hear who your guard dog really is." Everything changes tomorrow. She looked up at the stars, thinking of that brave shepherd who had refused to let corruption win. Astra had risked everything to do what was right, even after those meant to protect her had failed. Now it was their turn to make sure justice was finally served. The evidence in her briefcase felt heavy with purpose. Tomorrow they would begin dismantling the corrupt system that had betrayed a faithful servant. But tonight, Astra kept watch, protecting the innocent as she had always been meant to do, not because of a badge or a handler's orders, but because it was simply who she was at her core, a guardian of what was right. The morning sun cast long shadows across Calder's face as he adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror of his borrowed pickup truck. The expensive suit felt like a costume, but that was exactly the point. Today he wasn't Calder Rourke, the boat mechanic. He was Charles Reed, a wealthy businessman looking to upgrade his estate's security. "Remember," Tamsin's voice crackled through his hidden earpiece. "Get him talking about his breeding program. We need solid evidence." Calder touched his breast pocket, feeling the tiny recording device nestled there. "Copy that," he whispered, then stepped out into the crisp morning air. Harlow Security's main facility sprawled across 10 acres of manicured lawns and high fences. A sleek receptionist led Calder to an outdoor demonstration area where Boyd Harlow himself waited, impeccable in his tailored suit. "Mr. Reed." Harlow extended his hand, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I understand you're interested in our elite protection dogs." "My estate needs the best," Calder replied smoothly. "I hear your breeding program is exceptional." "Indeed." Harlow gestured to a handler who brought forward a muscular German shepherd. "This is one of our prime specimens. Shall we demonstrate?" Calder's heart skipped. The dog's markings were eerily similar to Astra's. He kept his face neutral as he watched the handler put the shepherd through basic obedience routines. "Impressive," Calder nodded. "But how do they handle more specialized commands? Police work, for instance?" Harlow's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting you should ask. Hans," he called to the handler, "give him the full demonstration." The handler barked out a series of standard police K-9 commands. The shepherd responded perfectly, too perfectly for a privately bred dog. Only extensively trained police dogs would know these specific protocols. "Remarkable," Calder commented, his pulse quickening. "Almost like watching a police K-9 unit in action." "Our methods are proprietary," Harlow said smoothly. "Now, regarding price." For the next hour, Calder played his role perfectly, asking detailed questions about the breeding program while his hidden device recorded everything. He even convinced Harlow to show him the shipping manifests for their international clients. Back in Tamsin's office that evening, they reviewed the evidence. "It's good," she said, "but not enough for a federal warrant. We need more." "What about those shipping records?" Calder pointed to his notes. "There's a major transfer happening tomorrow night at their dockside facility." Tamsin's eyes lit up. "I might be able to get a limited state warrant based on suspicious import practices. It won't let us search everything, but it might be enough to get us in there," Calder finished. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Tamsin worked her legal channels, while Calder coordinated with a network of local animal rescue groups. By sunset, they had their warrant, narrow in scope but legitimate, and 3 empty transport vehicles waiting nearby. The moon was hidden behind clouds as Calder, Tamsin, and a small team of state officers approached Harlow's shipping yard. Astra padded silently beside them, her presence a reminder of why they were there. "Remember," the lead officer whispered, "we can only search the areas specified in the warrant. One wrong move and this whole thing falls apart." They moved through the shadows, guided by the layout Calder had memorized during his visit. The sound of barking grew louder as they approached a long row of shipping containers. "There," Tamsin pointed to the numbers stenciled on the containers. "These match the manifest numbers from the warrant." The first container's lock clicked open under the officer's key. Inside, the beam of their flashlights revealed rows of cages. Dogs of all breeds, German shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dobermans, stared back at them with haunted eyes. "My God," one of the officers breathed. They worked quickly and quietly, documenting everything with cameras before beginning to move the dogs. Each rescue volunteer knew their role, efficiently transferring cages to the waiting vehicles. Astra stood guard, her ears pricked for any sign of discovery. When they reached the last container, she suddenly growled low in her throat. "Someone's coming," Calder warned. They froze as headlights swept across the yard, but the vehicle passed without slowing. For one triumphant hour, they worked without interruption, loading dog after dog to safety. The last cage clicked shut in the transport truck. Calder did a final head count, 47 dogs rescued in total. His heart pounded with a mixture of elation and disbelief. They'd done it. Time to move out, the lead officer ordered quietly. As they pulled away from the shipping yard, Calder watched in the rear-view mirror as the facility grew smaller. Beside him, Astra pressed her head against his leg, and he scratched behind her ears. "Good girl," he whispered. "We got them out." The convoy of vehicles drove carefully through the night, staying under the speed limit, taking different routes to various pre-arranged shelters and veterinary facilities. For the first time since this all began, Calder felt the tide turning. This wasn't just about saving a few dogs anymore. They had proof of systematic abuse and trafficking. In the passenger seat, Tamsin reviewed the documentation on her tablet. "This is solid evidence," she said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Combined with the breeding facility recordings and Astra's records, we might finally have enough to bring Harlow down." The victory was short-lived. The harsh whine of police sirens pierced the night air, red and blue lights flooding the shipping yard like an angry storm. Calder's heart dropped as 3 patrol cars screeched to a halt, blocking the exit. Sheriff Emile Dorsey emerged from the lead vehicle, his bulk casting an imposing shadow in the flashing lights. "Well, well," Dorsey drawled, adjusting his gun belt with deliberate slowness. "What do we have here?" "Breaking and entering. Grand theft." He clicked his tongue. "That's quite a rap sheet you're building, Rourke." Calder stood his ground near the rescue truck, where dozens of rescued dogs whimpered in their crates. Astra pressed against his leg, her amber eyes fixed on the approaching officers. Tamsin stepped forward, warrant in hand. "We have legal authority to be here, Sheriff. This is a state-sanctioned investigation into nothing." Dorsey cut her off, producing his own papers. "This here's a legitimate business with all proper permits. What I'm seeing is a coordinated theft operation." He nodded to his deputies. "Secure the animals." All of them. Officers moved in, surrounding the truck. Among them was Owen Pike, Tamsin's brother, his face tight with barely concealed tension. Calder noticed how he wouldn't meet his sister's eyes. "You can't do this!" Calder protested, reaching for the nearest crate that held the rescued puppy, the same one Astra had brought to him that stormy night. "These dogs were stolen, abused. We have proof." "The only proof I see," Dorsey interrupted, "is you breaking into private property and attempting to steal valuable security assets." The deputies began removing crates from the truck, the dogs inside crying out in fear and confusion. Calder moved to stop them, but Astra was faster. She positioned herself between Calder and the approaching officers, her hackles raised in protective warning. "Owen!" Tamsin pleaded with her brother. "You know this isn't right. You've seen the evidence." Owen's hand trembled on his holster, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool night air. "I'm sorry, Tam. I have to." Everything happened in a blur. Calder lunged forward as they grabbed for the puppy's crate. Astra moved with him, and Owen's gun cleared its holster. The sharp crack of the shot echoed through the yard. Astra's yelp of pain cut through Calder's heart like a knife. She had thrown herself in front of him, taking the bullet meant to stop his advance. Blood darkened her shoulder as she stumbled, but remained standing, still trying to protect him. "No!" Calder dropped to his knees beside her, combat medic instincts kicking in as he pressed his hands to the wound. "You monster!" "She was protecting me." Dorsey's boots crunched on gravel as he approached. "Attacking an officer, resisting arrest. You're just making this worse for yourself, Rourke." He gestured to his men. "Cuff him." 2 deputies roughly pulled Calder away from Astra, who tried to follow despite her injury. The sound of handcuffs clicking closed seemed to echo with finality. Through tears of rage and grief, Calder watched as animal control officers cornered and captured Astra, who was too wounded now to resist. "The dogs go back to their rightful owner," Dorsey announced with satisfaction. "And you, Rourke, you're going to jail where troublemakers belong." "This isn't over," Tamsin declared, her voice shaking with fury. "I'm calling the state attorney's office right now." "Call whoever you want, counselor." Dorsey smiled coldly. "But your friend here was caught red-handed. Even you can't argue with that." They dragged Calder toward the patrol car, past the truck where all their hopes were being systematically dismantled. Every frightened bark, every whimper from the crates felt like a personal failure. The puppy, the one that had started it all, cried out as it was loaded into a Harlow security vehicle. Astra's eyes found his as they forced her into a separate van. In that moment, Calder felt something inside him break. He had failed them all. The shepherd who had trusted him with her precious charges, the innocent pups who needed protection, even Tamsin who had risked everything to help him. All of it crumbling to dust. The back of the patrol car was cold and smelled of stale cigarettes. Through the window, Calder watched Tamsin arguing desperately with the officers, waving the now useless warrant. Owen stood apart from the others, staring at his hands as if seeing the gun there for the first time, the weight of his betrayal visible in the slump of his shoulders. As they drove away, Calder could still hear the dogs crying in the distance. The sound followed him all the way to the county jail, where the heavy doors clanged shut behind him with devastating finality. In the stark fluorescent light of the booking area, reality set in hard. He was locked away. The dogs were back in Harlow's cruel hands, and Astra, loyal, brave Astra, was wounded and alone. The cell they put him in was barely 6 feet by 8 feet, with a thin mattress on a metal frame and a stainless steel toilet sink combination. Calder sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, replaying every moment of the failed rescue. The image of Astra taking that bullet, of the puppy being carried away, of Owen's betrayal, it all swirled in his mind like a poisonous fog. Hours passed in a blur of regret and worry. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Astra's trusting gaze, heard the frightened cries of the puppies. The wound in her shoulder. Was anyone treating it? Would Harlow even bother, or would they? He couldn't complete the thought. Through the small window in his cell door, Calder watched the night shift guards make their rounds. Each passing hour felt like a weight pressing down on his chest, crushing his spirit. He had tried to stand up against corruption, to fight for those who couldn't defend themselves, and this was the result: complete defeat. The worst part wasn't the cold cell or the humiliation of arrest. It was knowing that right now those dogs were back in their cages, suffering, while he sat here powerless to help them. Astra had risked everything to save that puppy, to find someone she could trust, and he had let her down in the worst possible way. In the darkest hours of the night, Calder curled up on the thin mattress, his body aching from the rough arrest, but his heart hurting far worse. The victory they had tasted so briefly had turned to ashes in his mouth. Now, in the crushing solitude of his cell, all he could do was pray that somehow, some way, this wasn't truly the end. The morning after Calder's arrest, Tamsin cornered Owen in the station parking lot. Her brother flinched at the sight of her, unable to meet her eyes. "Why?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "How could you shoot Astra? How could you help them?" Owen leaned against his patrol car, shoulders sagging. "I didn't have a choice, Tam. Harlow, he owns me." "What are you talking about?" "The gambling debts," Owen confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I got in deep at the riverboat casino. Harlow paid them off, but then—" He swallowed hard. He made it clear what would happen if I didn't do exactly what he wanted. Tamsin stared at her brother, seeing for the first time how haunted he looked. "You should have come to me." I was ashamed. And scared. Owen ran a shaking hand through his hair. "But what happened last night? Shooting that dog who was just trying to protect someone, I can't live with myself." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. "Here. Internal logs from the clinic system. Dr. Vance's real records, showing healthy dogs marked for routine checkups, then magically appearing as euthanized in the official paperwork. Dates, microchip numbers, everything." Tamsin grabbed the drive, hope flaring. "This proves the forgeries?" Owen nodded. "And there's more. Emails between Harlow and Dorsey about the payoffs, bank transfers. I've been collecting it, telling myself someday I'd make it right." Within hours, Tamsin had the evidence in front of a state judge. By afternoon, Calder was released, charges dropped. They found Astra at the county veterinary clinic, bandaged, groggy, but alive. The reunion brought tears to Calder's eyes as the shepherd pressed her muzzle against his chest. But their relief was short-lived. Owen arrived with urgent news. Harlow's moving the last shipment tonight. Loading a truck for the midnight ferry. Once those dogs cross state lines. We'll lose them forever. Calder finished grimly, his hand gentle on Astra's head. Somewhere in that shipment was the puppy she had fought so hard to save. I can help. Owen offered quietly. I know the route, the timing. Let me try to make this right. Tamsin and Calder exchanged looks. Time was running out. With Astra still recovering and Harlow's operation about to vanish across the river, they had no choice but to trust Owen's change of heart. Their last chance to save the dogs and expose the whole cruel scheme hung by a thread. The midnight storm unleashed its fury as Calder, Tamsin, and a still limping Astra crouched behind shipping containers at the ferry terminal. Rain hammered against metal, providing cover for their approach. Through the downpour, they spotted Harlow's truck, its engine idling. There, Owen whispered through their earpieces. Last crate going in now. Calder's heart clenched as he watched Harlow's men roughly load a sealed transport crate. A tiny whimper carried through the rain. The puppy Astra had first brought him, the one that had started it all. Without warning, Harlow emerged from the shadows, climbing into the cab. The truck's engine roared to life. Now! Tamsin shouted. Calder sprinted through sheets of rain as the truck lurched forward. His boots slipped on wet pavement, but desperation drove him on. The truck picked up speed, heading for the ferry's loading ramp. In the sealed crate, the puppy would slowly suffocate. With a surge of strength, Calder launched himself at the moving vehicle. His fingers caught the rear gate, muscles screaming as he pulled himself up. Rain stung his eyes as he crawled toward the crate. Inside the cab, Astra appeared from nowhere, hurling herself through the passenger window. Her powerful jaws clamped onto Harlow's arm. The truck swerved violently, tires skidding on wet pavement. Calder wrestled with the crate's latch, his fingers numb from rain and cold. The puppy's cries grew weaker. Finally, the metal gave way with a snap. He yanked the door open, scooping up the limp bundle of fur. The truck spun sideways, throwing Calder against the side rails. He cradled the puppy, checking for breath. Nothing. Just like that first night, he pressed gently on the tiny chest, willing life back into the still form. Come on, little one, he whispered. Fight. A gunshot cracked through the storm. Calder looked up to see Harlow aiming a pistol at Tamsin, who stood blocking the ferry ramp. Astra snarled, blood matting her shoulder wound as she kept her grip on Harlow's arm. It's over, Boyd. Owen's voice rang out as he stepped from the shadows, his service weapon trained on his former master. Drop it! Harlow's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful! But Owen didn't waver. For the first time he stood tall, redemption in his stance. I said, drop it! State police cruisers appeared, lights piercing the rain. As officers swarmed the scene, the puppy in Calder's arms gave a shuddering gasp, then a weak cry. Astra's ears perked at the sound, even as she maintained her hold on Harlow until officers pulled him away in handcuffs. Tamsin rushed to Calder's side as he descended from the truck, the revived puppy tucked safely in his jacket. Astra limped over, her mission finally complete. Together they watched Harlow being led away as the storm began to fade. The county courthouse buzzed with anticipation as the verdict was read. Boyd Harlow, once untouchable in his expensive suits, stood pale and defeated as the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison. The evidence had been overwhelming: shipping manifests, forged documents, and most damning of all, Dr. Lenore Vance's testimony about the systematic abuse and trafficking of police dogs. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Dr. Vance had told the court, her voice steady despite her obvious shame. What we did to those animals, what we did to Astra, it was criminal. Sheriff Dorsey's disgrace came swiftly after. His role in selling Astra and covering up the operation led to his immediate removal from office. The sight of him surrendering his badge, shoulders slumped in defeat, marked the end of an era of corruption in their riverside town. Back at Calder's newly rebuilt boat shop, life took on a different rhythm. Each morning began with the joyful barking of Comet, the once dying puppy now transformed into a bouncing bundle of energy. His golden fur gleamed with health as he raced around the yard, Astra watching with maternal pride from her comfortable bed near Calder's workbench. The state K-9 unit had officially retired Astra to Calder's care, presenting her with a special commendation for her service, both past and present. She wore her new tags proudly, though these days her heroics were limited to teaching Comet manners and keeping Calder company as he worked. Tamsin visited often, her legal briefcase now a regular sight among the tools and boat parts. She and Calder had grown closer through their fight for justice, their shared courage forging a bond that neither had expected, but both treasured deeply. "You know," Tamsin said one morning, watching Calder throw a ball for the excited Comet while Astra supervised, "some might call it chance that she brought that puppy to your shop that night." Calder shook his head, reaching down to scratch Astra's ears. It wasn't chance. She knew exactly what she was doing, finding someone who would stand up and fight. He smiled as Comet returned with the ball, tail wagging furiously. "She taught me that sometimes the biggest miracles come from simply having the courage to do what's right." The morning sun sparkled on the river as Calder surveyed his small family. The loyal shepherd who had chosen him, the puppy they had saved together, and the woman who had stood beside him through it all. His days of isolation were over, replaced by the warm certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead,